Hello and welcome to Lore of the Cards, the series that looks to find the lore hidden in your Hearthstone deck. From our first night's episode on the Princes, you guys have come up with some great suggestions. Because of your comments, I will be covering the wings of the adventure in the next few episodes, as there seems to be a demand for that. Before we get started on those though, let's cover a card people seem to be intrigued about, Arfus. The art of the card is by Zoltan Boros, a prolific Hearthstone artist. Including the cards he's produced in tandem with Gabor Zizitsky, he's produced the art of 56 playable cards, as well as a host of uncollectible cards and adventure-specific cards. He previously produced art for the Warcraft TCG and also makes illustrations for Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering. So, Arfus. Oh boy, let's come straight out and say it. There is no lore for this card. It's assumed that he's the Lich King's pet specifically created for Hearthstone. But this is lore of the cards. Surely I have at least some lore in relation to this canine, whose name is created by combining Arthas' name with the onomatopoeic Arf. Puns. In terms of appearance, the creatures in the Warcraft universe that look most like Arfus are spirit beasts. These animals are the embodied spirits of the natural world, and their appearances can differ somewhat from one another. For example, the big cat spirit beast, Loch Nahak, looks very similar to a regular big cat, but its glowing blue eyes and mouth betray its true nature. Others appear to be made up of raw, crackling energy, such as Skull and the shadowy Gara. The variety that look most like Arfus are those that appear as ethereal spirits. This is perhaps the most common variety of spirit beast, appearing as crabs, bears, owls, porcupines, moose, big cats, and wolves. While Karoma is a wolf, he's the spirit beast that most resembles Arfus. According to the non-canonic Warcraft RPG, spirit beasts are naturally incorporeal but take on a true physical form to fight on behalf of their hunter or druid master. In WoW, Beastmaster hunters are able to tame them. Those that the beasts attack can find fighting them a daunting task. Spirit beasts phase in and out of existence, never appearing in the same place twice. Why tell you about these beasts? Well, I've got a tinfoil hat theory coming later in this video. Given the theme of the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion, it's far more likely that this ghostly dog is undead rather than a spirit beast. But what would cause a dog's spirit to linger within the land of the living? During the Warlords of Draenor expansion, adventurers with the archaeology profession were able to learn more about the Orcish clans that dwelt on this alternate timeline version of the Orcish homeworld. One of their discoveries was an emblem that once belonged to one of the orcs from the Frostwolf clan. When the emblem was complete, the Frostwolf ghost pup would become their permanent companion. The archaeologists discovered that no two creatures shared a longer or stronger relationship than that of a Frostwolf orc and their wolf companion. They'd eat together, sleep together, and fight together until one or both die an honourable death. Sometimes not even death would stop a Frostwolf coming to the aid of their orc. Perhaps this pendant belonged to this young Frostwolf's master, and now the spirit would come to the aid of the adventurer in pet battles. Perhaps this is Arfus' relationship with Arthas. Even when the dog passed or was killed, he would rise again to serve his master, even if his master was now the maniacally evil king of an army of rotting undead horrors. But surely, the Lich King is not a being of sentiment. Just before binding with the Lich King after his battle with Illidan to prevent him from destroying the king, Arthas Menethil would remove his own heart. He perceived it as a weakness, as with it, he was still human. Even with his heart removed, the Lich King still felt an affection toward an animal, Invincible. When he was 9, Arthas was visiting the Balnir farmstead. The Balnir family used to breed horses for the royal family of Lordaeron. At this time, the mare Brightmane was in labour and would give birth to a pure white horse, rare for the Balnir stock as they were usually grey in colour. The horse would be given to Arthas. The prince thought of naming him Starlight or Snowfall, due to the horse's coloration. But there was an informal tradition among the knights and nobles of Lordaeron to name their steeds after a quality. Arthas's father, Terenas' horse, was called Courageous, and the boy's tutor, Uther, had named his horse Steadfast. Keeping this tradition in mind, Arthas would come to call the young colt Invincible. 10 years later, riding in the winter, the ground slick with ice, Arthas would push Invincible just a little too much. The resulting accident had left the horse with a crippling injury. Invincible was too far from help, and Arthas himself was unable to heal the noble steed. Utterly mortified, the young prince had to put Invincible down, saving the horse a slow and agonizing death. The prince was crushed, having formed a bond with Invincible. The horse was loyal and great of heart. This harrowing event would contribute to Arthas's eventual decision to become a paladin of the Silver Hand. Upon Arthas's corruption at the hands of Ner'Zhul the Lich King, driving the prince mad with whispers through the Runeblade Frostmourne, the prince would return to his kingdom from the continent of Northrend. Arthas had been hunting the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, who he incorrectly thought led the Scourge. The prince's first action would be to murder his father. The second would be to travel to the Balnir farmstead and, with his new necromantic powers, revive Invincible. Now truly living up to his name, Invincible would become a spectre and disappear, being resummoned at the whim of his master. Arthas would ride atop Invincible throughout the campaigns of Warcraft 3 and Warcraft 3 The Frozen Throne. This included the Scourge's invasion of the Elven kingdom of Quel'Thalas. During this battle, Arthas would meet the Elven High King Anasterion in one-on-one combat. Arthas charged the king, but deftly avoiding the Death Knight's attack, Anasterion would sever the forelegs of Invincible, using the Elven blade Fellow Malorn. Like when he was 19, Arthas' steed would go crashing to the ground and would be unable to stand again. Reliving that moment, rage surged through Arthas, attacking the High King with renewed vigour. The Death Knight would obliterate the King's blade and brutally murdered the king that had ruled for 2,800 years. Arthas came to Invincible's aid. This time, however, he was able to help, using his powers as a Death Knight to repair the horse's injuries. Arthas would ride Invincible into battle right up until the moment he would dismount his steed to combat and defeat Illidan, and then stride up the Frozen Throne to become the Lich King. Even after removing his heart and becoming the Lich King, it is still presumed Arthas kept his fondness for Invincible. Adventurers in World of Warcraft have a small chance of claiming Invincible for themselves when fighting the Lich King on heroic mode in the 25-player version of Icecrown Citadel. It seems Arthas had further improved his trusted steed, Invincible now in possession of a pair of bat-like wings. Canonically, after Arthas' defeat, Invincible's saddle was lost, until reclaimed by the Knights of the Ebon Blade. Death Knights who were once in the Lich King's service, now independent. While I know this lore is not about Arfus, it does go some way to possibly explaining the relationship between the king and the canine. It's possible Arfus' relationship with Arthas was somewhat similar to the prince's relationship with Invincible. Maybe a family pet that died while the prince was still young, and when returning to his kingdom as a Death Knight, revived the dog for some needed companionship as he brought the Eastern Kingdoms to its knees. It can be pretty lonely sitting up on the Frozen Throne all by yourself sometimes. Alright, it's tinfoil hat time. It's time to come up with a theorycraft that probably isn't true, but it's always fun to speculate might be true. Hang on, give me a second. Right. Orifice's card text reads, "There must always be a Lich King." This pun references the foreboding warning given to Tyrion and adventurers by the spirit of Arthas' father upon the Lich King's defeat. There must always be a Lich King. Without the Lich King to control the masses of the undead Scourge, they would run rampant across the world of Azeroth. That's why Bolvar Fordragon willingly stepped into the role. Perhaps this quote has a double meaning, and that's why it's referenced for Arfus. Finally defeated, Arthas' spirit was free from his body. We mentioned earlier that spirit beasts are embodiments of the natural world. Well, perhaps Arthas' spirit, now free of corruption, has manifested as the spirit beast, Arfus. Of course, the Arfus card is not just an adorable puppy, but is a way for players to access Death Knight class cards early on in a game. Each of these cards have origins in Warcraft games before Hearthstone. Anti-Magic Shell was first used by the Undead's Banshee unit in Warcraft 3. All Banshees began with the Curse spell, affecting an enemy's hit rate in combat. After Adept training was researched in the Temple of the Damned, Anti-Magic Shell became available to them. Death Knights were given this spell in World of Warcraft. This defensive cooldown that can be used every minute absorbs magic damage up to 30% of the Death Knight's health and prevents harmful magic effects being applied to the undead hero. The damage absorbed would also fuel one of the Death Knight's resources, runic power. Army of the Dead was first seen in World of Warcraft, but the Death Knights in Warcraft 3 had a very similar spell called Animate Dead. This would raise 6 recently killed units to fight for the Death Knight. On top of this, they were also invulnerable. Army of the Dead in WoW instead summons a host of ghouls to fight by the Death Knight's side. This used to be a defensive cooldown, the ghouls taunting those they attacked. It is now used as a DPS cooldown and only available to the unholy spec of Death Knights. Army of the Dead is a spell that is so quintessentially Death Knight, it was made into one of Arthas' heroic abilities in Heroes of the Storm. It took until World of Warcraft for Death and Decay to become a part of the Scourge Death Knight's kit. The spell was first introduced in Warcraft 2 and was cast by the Death Knights of the Horde. These Death Knights were more magic casters rather than the runic warriors of the Scourge. Death and Decay would damage an area for tremendous damage, perfect for destroying enemy structures, or damaging units as they struggle to make their way through a choke point. In Warcraft 3, the spell was given to the Lich hero unit as their ultimate ability. In fact, a version of the ability has just been announced for Quel'Thalas in Heroes of the Storm. In WoW, Death and Decay used to be an AoE spell for all Death Knight specs, but now only Blood and Unholy can make use of it. Death Coil has always been a Death Knight spell, firstly belonging to the Horde Death Knights and then the Death Knights of the Scourge. It has always combined damage with healing. In Warcraft 2, the Death Knight received the beneficial healing. In 3, the Death Knight could either use the spell to damage foes or heal undead allies. In WoW, a Death Knight hero damages a foe while also returning some energy to their ghoul minion, its resource. It used to be able to heal the ghoul, but this feature of the spell was recently removed. Death Coil is used by Arthas in Heroes too, doubling as damage to enemies or self-healing. Death Grip was added to the Death Knight skill set in WoW, pulling an enemy toward the Death Knight. In the tanking Blood spec, it also forces the target to attack the Death Knight. Doom Pact doesn't actually share a name with any previous Death Knight ability, though given its effect and name, it's likely connected to the Warcraft 3 Death Knight ability, Death Pact. Doom sacrifices cards to clear the board, whereas Death would sacrifice a friendly unit to heal the Death Knight hero. Obliterate is a key part of a Frost Death Knight's damage rotation, one of their most powerful moves, striking the opponent with both their weapons. The powerful effect of the Hearthstone card recognises this. Obviously, Frostmourne itself has a fair amount of lore to it, as this was the weapon of Arthas himself. A runic blade that fed on souls, the sword was forced from the Lich King's block of ice to one day land in the hands of Arthas, so that the prince could become Ner'Zhul's champion. The sword would remain in Arthas' grip until his death, shattering, though the shards of Frostmourne would later be used to craft Icebringer and Frost Reaper, the blades of the fallen prince, to aid a powerful Death Knight fight the Burning Legion. Frostmourne really could be its own episode sometime. So, there you have it, the lore that loosely connects to Arfus. While it has been a stretch at times, I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, give this video a like, share it around and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed the art, I've credited the artists in the description below. To keep up to date with 6 and the videos being worked on, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm hoping to start streaming again soon. While Hearthstone will obviously be on the rotation, I'm looking to start completely afresh in WoW, so those watching the stream can come along for a WoW lore journey from the beginning. I play Horde and usually a tank, though thinking of trying healing. So in the description are a couple of polls, one to select my race, the other my class. Let me know what you want to see, and I'll let you know when streaming gets underway. Thanks everyone. Until next time, happy Hearthstoning.